The release of American POW Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl in exchange for those 5 Gitmo prisoners has renewed a long-standing debate about Guantanamo Bay. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel addressed the issue on NBC's Meet the Press.
The president has made very clear he wants to close Guantanamo. We do have responsibilities that we don't let anyone out of Guantanamo, and I will not sign off on any detainee coming out of Guantanamo unless I am assured, unless our government is assured, our country can be assured, that we can sufficiently mitigate any risk to America's security.
Carol Rosenberg covers Guantanamo Bay for the Miami Herald. In fact, has spent more time there than any other reporter and has won a number of awards as a result. Carol, thanks very much for being with us today from Miami. What is the sense in Guantanamo as to how this went down? Because you've got 5 high-ranking Taliban. At the same time, you've got pre-released Yemeni prisoners who for years have been there. Every court has said that they could go. They're low-level fighters, but they have not been able to be released because of congressional restrictions.
There has to be a sense of disappointment down there, Andrea, because these 5 men who were let go were categorized as indefinite detainees, forever prisoners. And yes, there are 78 other men among the 149 captives down there who have been told once arrangements have been made, they would be able to go. And yes, many of them are Yemenis, and many of them are hoping that the U.S. will find a way to make an agreement with the Yemeni government for them to either leave Gitmo and go home or go somewhere else. That's what's so surprising about this deal. Remember, these men were not on the list to be let go. They were on the list to be held as indefinite detainees.
And it's because among them is a former deputy defense minister of the Taliban. I mean, these were the leaders who planned attacks on Americans and on Afghans. So these are not fighters from the battlefield. They're decision makers who could be making those kinds of decisions from their house arrest in Qatar. These men are a combination of defense figures, intelligence figures, and political figures. This is what we know from their files. And in Afghanistan, certainly in the Taliban, those categories bleed over one into another. What's of interest, I think, perhaps, is that during their stay at Guantanamo, these were not troublemakers. These were not difficult prisoners. They were generally, for years, described as compliant, communal, cooperative captives who got to live in these medium security confinement. They were not considered dangerous, which I think speaks to what you said about the fact that they are more like the bureaucrats, the upper echelon, and what they will do in Qatar, how they will relate to the Taliban back home, and what they'll be able, how they will be able to function has to have been part of these secret negotiations that went on prior to their transfer Saturday. Carol, we've just got this in from a conference that's going on downtown. I was there earlier today. Dennis McDonough, the White House Chief of Staff, just spoke and addressed partly the question of Republican criticism of the trade. This is a conference down at CSIS, the think tank, also hosted by the Treasury Department. Let's watch.
Let's also be clear about how we got this done. We've been consulting with members of Congress about this effort, including the potential transfer of 5 Gitmo detainees for years. I know this because I participated in many of those consultations myself when I served on the staff of the National Security Council. So this should not have been a surprise to any of the members of Congress who have been consulting about it, commenting about it.
So there's the pushback from the White House just moments ago that they were being consulted along the way and for operational reasons could not be consulted before the trade was done. Yes, they did not comply with the 30-day statutory notice requirement. The White House and the Pentagon say the president had that executive authority to do this, particularly because it was this delicate swap for a prisoner of war, and that they chose to not notify them until the actual exchange was underway. But it shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. We've known that this administration has been talking about a Qatari deal for a number of years now. We knew the identities of these 5 men. This is not something that came out of the blue. And I have to tell you, on Saturday, when I saw the C-17 on the on the landing strip at Guantanamo. It seemed to me that this was the deal that was going down. But it was a surprise to the degree that they didn't get notice. And I have to tell you, Andrea, it was also a surprise to the Red Cross. They told me this morning that they didn't get their notice and they didn't have an opportunity to do an exit interview with these men. So, with these 5 men. So what I think it says is that the administration moved on its own quickly and was in a way using a page from the Bush administration playbook of cutting out Congress and cutting out the Red Cross and doing what it thought was right at the moment and telling people afterwards.
Carol Rosenberg, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us today. And former NSA contractor Edward Snowden making headlines once again with yet another document leak, shedding new light on the U.S. government's surveillance capabilities. According to top secret documents obtained from Snowden earlier and now published by the New York Times, the NSA is collecting millions of images a day from emails, texts, and social media for use in its facial recognition programs. The technology is becoming extremely important to intelligence agencies to try to track suspected terrorists and other targets. And in an interview with Brazil's Globo News, Snowden has now revealed he has applied for asylum in several countries, including Brazil. His options are limited. The State Department revoked his passport. His asylum in Russia was granted only on a temporary basis, expiring at the end of July.